I never thought a simple haircut would change everything. You walk into a salon expecting small talk, maybe a new look, and that's it. But that day, something was different. The music was soft, the scent of coconut oil in the air, and she greeted me with a smile that didn't feel rehearsed. Her name was Elena. Just my hairstylist, at least, that's what I told myself. It was a random Thursday. I was running late from work, stressed from deadlines, and barely in the mood for conversation. But Elena, with her calm voice and steady hands, had this way of making the world slow down. She asked if I wanted the usual, and I nodded without thinking. I didn't know then that those 30 minutes would turn into something far deeper than a trim. We talked about usual stuff at first, weather, music, traffic. But slowly, the conversation turned. She asked about my week, really listened. She noticed things others didn't, how tired my eyes looked, the tension in my shoulders, the way I exhaled like I had too much on my mind. There was something comforting in her presence, like she saw beyond the surface. And when she smiled, it felt like it was just for me. I caught myself staring at her reflection in the mirror more than once. She had this gentle way of moving, like everything she did had purpose. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Just a conversation. Just a haircut. But deep down, something was shifting. She wasn't just a stylist anymore, at least, not to me. When she ran her fingers through my hair to check the layers, I felt a strange chill. Not from the air, but from the closeness. The kind that makes your heart beat just a little faster, even when your mind is telling you to keep it together. And then, as she leaned in to dust the tiny strands off my neck, she whispered something soft, barely audible. I froze. It wasn't part of the usual customer talk. It wasn't a joke or a mistake. What she said caught me so off guard that for a second, I couldn't even breathe. I looked at her in the mirror, confused, but she just smiled, calm, almost like she'd been holding that in for a while. From that moment on, I knew I couldn't leave like nothing had happened. I tried to brush it off, convince myself I'd misheard. But the way she looked at me said otherwise. Something had changed in that room. Something I hadn't been ready for. Was it just a spark? A mistake? Or the beginning of something real? I wasn't sure what to do next. But one thing was clear, this wasn't just a haircut anymore. And whatever she whispered, it was about to change everything. What did she say? And why me? You'll want to hear what happened next. Because this story? It's anything but ordinary. I walked out of the salon that evening, but her words kept playing in my head like a quiet echo. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just a whisper, but filled with something I couldn't name. I kept replaying the moment, her eyes locked with mine in the mirror, the soft brush of her fingers on my skin, and that slight pause before she leaned in. You don't see it, do you? She had said. That's all. Just that. But the way she said it, like it meant more than I could understand. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept asking myself what she meant. Was it a flirtation? A warning? A hidden truth she noticed in me? And why did it feel like she knew something I didn't? I had never really opened up to anyone in that chair, but maybe, over the months, in little pieces, she had seen the cracks. Elena had only been my hairstylist for about 6 months. I started coming in after moving to this new neighborhood. She was the kind of person who remembered the small things, what kind of tea I liked, how I always rubbed my temples when work stress hit, that I once mentioned a broken engagement without saying much more. She never pried, never judged. Just listened. And maybe that's why her voice held so much weight now. The next time I saw her was 2 weeks later. I hadn't planned to book again so soon, but something pulled me back. I told myself it was just to ask her what she meant. But deep down, I knew I needed to see her. When I walked in, she greeted me the same way, same smile, but her eyes? They held something different. And this time, I was ready to ask. Or at least, I thought I was. As I sat back in the chair again, something in the air felt heavier. Not tense, exactly, just charged. Elena didn't mention the last visit. She didn't repeat the whisper or explain it. She moved through the motions like usual, sectioning my hair, combing carefully, asking if I wanted a trim. But every touch, every glance in the mirror, felt loaded with something unspoken. I wanted to ask her directly, "What did you mean that day?" but the words got stuck every time I tried. Halfway through the haircut, she paused. Our eyes met in the mirror. "You seem distracted," she said gently, tilting her head. I gave a half smile, but I couldn't fake it. My mind was spinning. I asked her how she'd been, trying to shift the focus. She talked about the salon, a new stylist joining next week, her weekend plans. But underneath it all, there was still that question hanging between us. Later, while she was blow-drying my hair, the power flickered. Just for a second. The lights dimmed, then came back. She laughed softly and said, "This building's full of surprises." But her tone felt off, like she meant more than just the wiring. It was subtle, but there. And then, while brushing out the last strands, she asked quietly, "Do you ever wonder why people end up where they do? Like, who walks in, and why?" I didn't know how to answer. Was she talking about fate? About me? Or was it her way of saying something she couldn't say out loud? That was the moment I started wondering if she had her own story. Something she wasn't telling. Maybe she wasn't just noticing my pain. Maybe she had some of her own. And maybe, we were both hiding more than we realized. That night, after the second visit, I couldn't shake the feeling that Elena was trying to tell me something without actually saying it. Her words lingered, soft, vague, but purposeful. I started noticing little things that hadn't caught my attention before. The way she glanced at the door when it opened, how she hesitated before answering questions, the nervous flick of her fingers when no one was looking. It felt like she was waiting, for something or someone. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I was becoming a part of whatever that was. I found myself walking past the salon more often, pretending I was just in the area. Once, I saw her standing outside alone after closing, staring at her phone like she was afraid of it. I almost approached her but stopped. She looked up, met my eyes across the street, and gave a nod. That one look sent chills through me. Not because it was romantic, because it felt like a silent plea. Like she wanted me to understand something she still couldn't say. A few days later, I got a message from the salon. My next appointment had been moved up. Elena had personally asked if I could come sooner. No explanation. Just a new date and time. I felt a strange mix of curiosity and concern. When I arrived, the salon was nearly empty. The receptionist wasn't at the desk. Music played low, lights dimmer than usual. Elena was already waiting, not with her usual smile, but with a serious look in her eyes. She locked the door behind me after I stepped in. My heart skipped. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice steady but low. "And I need you to listen, really listen. Because it's not just about us anymore." I stood frozen, the hum of the hairdryer in the background sounding more distant now. Elena's eyes didn't leave mine. She wasn't smiling, wasn't nervous this time. Just serious, too serious. "It's not just about us anymore," she repeated, then turned away briefly to close the blinds. My heart pounded, confused and uneasy, but also pulled deeper by whatever this was turning into. She walked back and sat on the salon chair across from me, no longer trying to keep up the stylist customer routine. "You remember that whisper," she said softly. "The one you couldn't stop thinking about?" I nodded slowly. "You don't see it, do you?" I whispered back. What was I supposed to see? She looked down at her hands for a second. "You came in here every few weeks. Quiet, kind, a little broken. But there was something more. I saw it the first day. You were being followed." The room suddenly felt colder. I let out a half laugh, unsure if she was joking. But her eyes didn't flinch. I know how it sounds. But every time you came in, there was someone outside. A man. Same guy. Parked across the street, never came in, but always watched. I could barely breathe. I thought back, my mind scrambling through old memories. The red car I'd brushed off as coincidence. The man in the hoodie always on his phone near the cafe next door. Things I hadn't paid attention to suddenly made a twisted kind of sense. I didn't say anything at first because I didn't know what it meant, she continued, but last time you left, he followed you. That hit hard. And now? I asked, my voice barely there. That's why I moved your appointment up, she said, standing again. I saw him again this morning. But this time, he wasn't watching you. He came in, asked for you by name. Said he was a friend. Something inside me cracked open, fear, confusion, everything at once. How does he know who I am? I asked, my voice shaking. Elena leaned closer. That's what we need to figure out. But whatever this is, you're not just part of it now. So am I. Outside, a car engine idled. Neither of us moved. The door stayed locked, and the silence stretched too long. Something was coming. And neither of us knew just how close it already was. Elena pulled out her phone and showed me a blurry photo taken from inside the salon. There he was. The same man I'd seen once or twice but never thought twice about. Medium build, beard, cap low over his eyes. He said his name was Marcus, she said. But when I asked who he was to you, he hesitated. Then just smiled and left. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't know anyone named Marcus. At least, not anymore. I reached into my own phone, scrolled through old contacts, emails, nothing. But then, an old message popped up in my archive. From 3 years ago. Let me fix things, I'll find you again. It was from Marcus. My ex's brother. We hadn't spoken since the breakup and the mess that came after. I remembered now, he had shown up at my old job once, uninvited. Creeped me out. I blocked him everywhere. I never thought he'd actually keep looking. I think he's been watching longer than we thought, I said, feeling the weight of it hit me all at once. And now he's found me. Elena stepped away from the window, her face pale but calm. We can't stay here. She reached into her bag and handed me a small slip of paper. This is a friend of mine. Works security. Quietly. He owes me a favor. We'll go together. As we opened the back door to avoid the street, I heard footsteps behind us. Elena grabbed my hand and pulled me faster. We made it to the alley, hearts racing, and just when we thought we were safe, he stepped out from the shadows. Long time, Marcus said, smirking like this was all just a game. Before I could say a word, Elena stepped forward, her voice steady. She's not alone. Then, in a flash, sirens. A black SUV pulled up. 2 men jumped out, shouting Marcus' name. He ran, but they tackled him in seconds. It was over. I turned to Elena, breathless. How did they get here so fast? She smiled faintly, brushing hair from her face. I called them before you arrived. Just in case. I laughed, half in shock. So you really planned all of this? She looked at me, eyes steady. Not all. Just enough to protect you. And as we stood there, the danger fading behind flashing lights, I realized something else. This wasn't just about safety. Somehow, somewhere along the way, I'd fallen for her. The days after that night felt surreal. The fear had lifted, but the weight of everything that had happened still lingered. Marcus was taken into custody. Turns out he had been quietly digging into my life for months, using old connections and bits of information to stay hidden. The police told me he had a history, restraining orders from others, obsessive behavior. I was lucky. And I knew Elena was a big reason I was safe now. The salon reopened a few days later, but things had changed. Elena and I weren't just casual anymore. We had shared something far deeper than conversation. In the quiet moments between appointments, in the laughter that slowly returned, I started to see the real her, strong, thoughtful, protective in ways I hadn't expected. She never wanted to be anyone's hero, but she was mine. One evening, sitting across from her after closing hours, I finally asked, "Why did you care so much? You barely knew me back then." She looked at me, her hands resting gently on the counter. "Because I saw myself in you," she said. Alone, not really trusting people, carrying pain quietly. I couldn't look away. That answer stayed with me. In the weeks that followed, we spent more time together, outside the salon, beyond the old roles we played. There were still quiet moments, still healing to be done. But something real had begun. Not rushed, not perfect, but honest. An unexpected romance born from something dark, but growing into something light. Sometimes I think back to that first haircut, that first whisper. You don't see it, do you? Now I do. I see what she meant. About being seen. About connection. About how a simple moment can lead to something life-changing. This story wasn't just about danger or secrets. It was about trust. About how sometimes, the people who save us aren't loud about it. They whisper. They show up. And they stay. She was just my hairstylist, until she wasn't. She became the person who changed everything. 40.